Oh yeah!
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the Film Festival Flicks Mountain Adventure Film Festival panel series. Today we're talking about distribution strategies for filmmakers, and I'm very lucky here to have Mark Covino from a band called Death, and Kayla Kagan, social media expert, will be joining us shortly. So the goal of today is to just discuss where things are in the world, how things are changing, and as a filmmaker, how you have the opportunity to work with distributors like us, with other groups, how to leverage platforms, and how to reach your audience both as a hybrid of what you can do yourself and what you can do with distributors. So as we get started, Mark, can you, just tell us a little bit about yourself and about your film?
Sure. I'm Mark Covino. I was born and raised in Long Island, New York, and all my life I've wanted to make movies, and eventually ended up moving to Vermont. Went to a film college up here, and I wanted to make narrative movies. I didn't want to make documentaries, but somehow through a series of weird events, I started making a documentary, and from there I made another documentary, and from that doc I started making the doc that you see named in my lower third, A Band Called Death. And I've just kind of been in this world of documentary filmmaking for the past 10 years now. That's kind of the abbreviated, that's the short version.
So that's great, because the people that we're really talking to, the adventure space is 99% documentary. So they're, you've done a lot in music, they're doing adventure, but a lot of it's the same. So over the last 10 years, what are some of the shifts, and how has it affected your ability to make your films and how to get those films out to an audience?
Well, my first two docs before I made A Band Called Death, I never even really got out there. This was the first time in my life I actually got a film out there, and got a distributor. So this was all new to me. We kind of by chance, my co-director and I, we'd spent a year and a half making this film, and ran out of money halfway through making A Band Called Death, and we're about to either hang it up or spend a long time raising money, because everything was out of pocket. It was a passion project. And right around that time that we were having that really sad conversation, a Hollywood producer found a trailer that I had cut and put online. His name was Scott Mosier. He produced Good Will Hunting and Clerks and like all of Kevin Smith's movies. And he came in and kind of saved the day and helped find us finishing money through his friends who are also producers. And it was through those guys that they set up they basically sent our film to a bunch of film festivals. And the first big one that we got into, which was the world premiere, was at the Los Angeles Film Festival, where a bunch of people were bidding on our movie, and eventually we went with the people who were bidding not just the most in our movie, but who was going to do the most for our release in terms of exposure and DVD and all of that. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and that was Draft House Films, right? The distribution arm of Alamo Draft House Theaters that ended up picking up the film?
Yeah, it was Draft House Films, who I had not heard of at the time that they were approaching us. I knew of the theaters. I didn't know that they had a distribution arm, and I guess they were fairly new to distribution at that time. We're talking 2012 now.
No, absolutely. So they were very new, as we were starting about the same time, and we've had a great relationship working with them, which is why we're very proud to have a band called Death on the Film Festival Flix platform and working with you.
Thank you.
But you make a really good point, and I think this is important for filmmakers, is you said you didn't necessarily go who was offering the most money, although money is nice. You went with the group that you could tell was going to be as passionate about your film as you were.
Yes.
Just because, one of the sad comments that was made to me not too long ago by an aggregator, which for those of you who don't know, an aggregator takes content and they're the ones that put it up into like iTunes, Xbox, PlayStation, and Walmart. They become the central resource. And what the head of one of the companies told me was that, in his opinion, the shelf life of a film is 2 weeks. And I completely disagree. I watch films that are 10, 15, 20 years old all the time, and if I've never seen them, they're as relevant as ever. And I think that's where it's up to us as specialty companies. I think that's up to you as a filmmaker to not accept that and say, great, I'm glad it's going to get out there, but I care. How am I going to keep my film relevant for the next 5, 10, or 20 years? So can you talk a little bit about some of what your experience has been in terms of that balance between what came about with the initial release and then everything that's been the process then of keeping it alive?
Yeah, it was interesting with our release. There was a lot of buzz going on at the time that our film was picked up. Unfortunately, another film came out at the same time that kind of overshadowed our film, Searching for Sugar Man. I don't know if you've seen that probably, but there was still a lot of buzz going on with our film, and it was eventually released in June of 2013 through video on demand, and basically what happened was the first month there was a heavy push from Draft House through all the video on demands. There was a lot of interviews done with us and all of this, and then an interesting thing that happened was Draft House ended up firing their sub-distributor, which took care of all of our video on demand. And when they fired our sub-distributor, our film wasn't available anywhere right when it was getting hot, and it was like #2 on iTunes. And I thought that was like the kiss of death. I thought we were done. They eventually ended up getting a new sub-distributor, and our film was put back online, but they didn't push it as heavy because they had other films that came up at that time. It's not really their fault. It's just the way things happen. And it was basically through Jeff, and our producer just pushing the film a lot through social media that got the film out there even more, and also our producers, Matt and Kevin, submitting it to tons of film festivals where it got even more exposure, and it kind of found a life of its own when it hit Netflix shortly after that. Netflix, for those that don't know, I mean, they pay a flat fee and they don't pay you anything from any of the rentals, which is kind of a bummer. But we had a lot of hits on Netflix, and we got really popular on there. I think we were like up there with Blackfish at one point. They were saying, if you watch Blackfish, watch this, and if you watch this, watch Blackfish. I thought that was kind of neat. And then it hit DVD shortly after that, and I don't know how well it did on DVD, but I definitely know that through Netflix, it found a huge audience around the world, basically.
Well, that's really cool, and I mean, since you talk about social media, Kayla Kagan has luckily been able to join us now, so I'm going to flip over to her. But Kayla, can you just introduce and tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit from your experience of what role social media now plays in, especially for small films, but certainly documentary films, of how to reach an audience and engage them in your film? Kayla, I think you're muted still. Are you there?
Looks like she's muted on mine. There's a strike through the mic.
Yeah, no, I see that. Yeah, I mean, it's something. Maybe the internet connection is not quite right. Well, that's technology for you.
Yeah.
But again, I think the cool thing, I had one of our filmmakers said to me not long ago, and it was a great statement. He sent an article, and it was from book publishing, and it said that a publisher's job is mistakenly thought of as to get billboards in Times Square and get you on all the morning shows and the New York Times best-selling list. But what the job really is to get 10,000 of the right people to read your book and tell their friends. And I think that's the same thing that we have to do with these small movies is how do you get that initial base going, and that can be a combination of the audience that you have, the people within that you can leverage. In your case, like you talked about Netflix, like of course everybody wants that big financial hit, but beyond that, and especially in the documentary world, I don't know that that's why people first and foremost make movies. So your film is being discovered, like all that awareness. Well, luckily Netflix also tends to make licenses for short periods of time. So within the course of a couple years, hopefully the world will know about your film and about you. And when it goes off the air, either they'll relicense it for a bigger fee, or people will then turn back to all those other places that are available to find the film. And
it was a year license actually, and it did end a while ago, like a month or two ago. They didn't renew, unfortunately. I was hoping that they would come back to try and renew it, but.
Well, that goes into the discussion of where with all the smart TV apps and all the different content that you're going to start to see that Netflix and Hulu and Google Plus and Amazon, everybody's going away from licensing content that's everywhere, and they really are getting into original content programming and exclusives solely because pretty soon I foresee that you're going to have, Warner Brothers is going to have an app, and if you want to watch Batman, you have to buy it there because it's not going to be anywhere else. And so everybody realizes if they don't have original content, then there's no strength in that. So that is changing, but that's why we come back to, and I see this, I've been talking about it with adventure film. If you, like the band called Death, what kind of a following do they still have, organically?
It's a pretty strong. It's kind of like a cult following. I mean, even our film has like a cult following. It's that film and the band as well that you hear people like, oh, have you heard about this? And they tell their friends and they tell their friends and.
Hi guys, can I jump in? Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Yep, we got you, Kayla. Jump on in.
Yeah, I apologize for all the delays, major technical glitches that actually sent me outside onto the phone. Anyway, I apologize.
That's okay. I like your glasses.
Earlier. Thanks. It's California, so it's not snowy, unfortunately. But so I'll try to do this. Hi, everyone. And I heard your question earlier. I'm going to address that, Benji. I just want to say with a band called Death, I know for a fact from Twitter and social and Facebook and a lot of places online, their legacy continued with their kids, obviously, and their kids have spread the message. But the fans who know about a band called Death are the strongest word of mouth. I mean, they absolutely, including my husband and I, but like once you find out about them, you want everyone to know. It's kind of one of those strangely gospel things because they weren't mentioned in history for a long time. And if you follow the punk movement, you don't know a lot about them because they were neglected. So once you find out about their music and how good it is and their story and that it's a family story, you want to know more. Like, I'd love to see if there was more information. I'd watch another documentary on them, but there's only so much.
I have a couple. I have like 10 hours of deleted scenes.
Those need to be released one day when you're ready. But I think the fans of the band would really want to see that information.
Yeah, I do. Occasionally, I'll blast one out on our Facebook page. I'll just, like for Throwback Thursday, I'll throw a deleted scene on.
So Kayla, with that, what are some of the best ways to use social media, and what are the common mistakes where people think they're reaching their audience, but it's just kind of falling on deaf ears?
Well, mistakes are kind of easier to address first, but I would say that sometimes pandering or when you're not being truthful about the product you're actually selling, people sense that, and they know when it's not authentic or you don't care about the product itself. Usually, if you're the filmmaker, you care deeply about it, or you wouldn't get it up there in the first place. But finding and really, really getting specific with who you want to know about your film and why, I think a lot of people forget why they do what they do, not filmmakers in particular, but people using social media. It's all about what? Selling it how? Selling it what? Selling it now, making money. But if you find the authentic message behind that of why you want this story told or why you want this film out there or why you're trying to reach a group of people who not only love punk music, but want to know about African American history, but want to also know about musicians they've never heard of or want to discover, you get very specific and not just like, oh, I'm going to go to Pitchfork Media only because I know they'll cover something for one day. And then once you start to get a following, whether it's on Twitter or Facebook, a lot of it is actually keeping the engagement going. Like if you find somebody who is a super fan about your film or your, especially if it's a smaller film, find out what they really like and what really didn't work for them, and make them feel like they're part of the process, not because you're trying to market to them, but because you're trying to actually find out more about what worked for your film and how you can make more films and what they want to see as well. And it really is about, I think, actually creating, sorry, there's a Ferrari. It's about creating a personal relationship and not just going, you're all out there, I'm trying to sell to anyone I can. It's saying, I want to acknowledge and get the people excited that I care about in selling this movie or selling this book. The one thing I really like about Film Festival Flicks is, though we want to acquire and distribute really interesting films, we have to have a heart behind it. If we don't like what's there, we're not interested in putting it out. And I think that sometimes gets overlooked by companies who are just trying to throw anything to the wall and see what sticks. And I think that's something that on social media you can kind of tell when people are doing that as well. You know, when as soon as they send their message and they drop it and don't talk about anything else, you know there's the lack of real passion behind what they're doing, and it's just a business.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I mean, I know a lot of people that have made a lot of money selling packages. It's got the right actors, it's going to be shot in the right place.
Sure.
And that's fine, but especially in this digital world, there's so much noise, and we really believe in that you need to have an audience that you can start with. But if that audience isn't willing to talk and share and become part of the community and really engage it, then it's going to be a much more difficult process for that film to have a life. So I guess the question...
One of my favorite things, too, is when our fans tell us what they are watching, and then we find out about it, and it's something maybe we can get our hands on, or maybe we can get films by the same filmmaker or something like that. Because I've learned just as much from working at the film festival Flicks as I have from the people who are coming to our events, who are telling me, if you like a band called that, you have to check out this. It's like Amazon, but real life and better. You know, it's like, tell me the preferred picks, but it's because of the social connection that we get to get personal, and that's a lot more interesting to me.
So Mark, one of the things that I definitely have come to believe is that there has to be a place to start with a film. So it can be that there is a following for the subject, or the person has an intimate knowledge of the industry, or whatever it may be. And then the question is if you're going to go with a distributor, how are they going to enhance that or go beyond that? So can you talk a little bit about in the working relationship with with Draft House, where was the balance between what you already had with the Band Called Death fan base, and then how did it go beyond that to grow larger?
Man, let me try to remember going back now.
Like in today's age with Vimeo or Reelhouse or VHX, do you think that you could have just released this online by yourself to the fan base that already existed and had the success that you've had?
I don't think so per se. I feel like the fan base that the band has now is a lot larger than it was back when we released the film. So the film has definitely helped them get a lot more exposure. So I think at the time we needed as much help as possible from PR people and us as well, just working our butts up. I still, me and Jeff, every single day we post something somewhere, to try and get people engaged. And I'm still going to film festivals. I'm still hustling. I'm going to a film festival this April, actually. And our film has played like 3 years straight, which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's great to know that even after it's been on Netflix, like there still is a festival life. There still are platforms that will take it. This whole idea of the studio model of race for the bottom in the independent world doesn't exist. Films will be timeless as long as you can keep it relevant.
I know one of our goals was to have the band tour with the movie when it was first released. that was something that Jeff and I had always wanted to do, and then Draft House wanted to do, but it didn't work out with the band's schedule, and money wise, it was hard to travel, to pay for so many people to travel for an independent film. you know.
Kayla, what about? Can you tell us about like the Twitter chats and the different things that you've been doing to help bring engagement to to audiences all over the world without having to tour a band around the country?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, today we did a Twitter chat actually, and so I was in California. We had somebody in Washington, one person in Montana, one person in Munich, and one person in Maine. And between the 5 of us and broadcasting to all of the people who are following us, we hit 2 countries, at least, actually 3, because we had some UK coming in as well, responding. And we got to talk about topics to adventurers and scientists who were unaware of the projects going on and unaware about this month's Mountain Adventure Film Festival. But when we've done chats before, one of the things I really like, especially after we have a film that does really well with one of our theatrical theatrical events and building awareness for it, is that the people who are seeing the films love. It's funny. Some of them are lurkers, and they send me the questions when I tell them they can ask the filmmakers the questions or the directors. I think some of them get a little starstruck or a little shy, which you don't always think of on Twitter, but they do. They get excited to feel like they're closer to knowing the story of how the film was made or why the film was made. And sometimes they give me opinions about the film that I was not expecting, but I really like hearing it. But what it does is it allows other people who've seen the film to have their followers follow along the conversation, and if they haven't seen the film, come and get it. We've had an increase of people who read the Twitter chats, then come and buy the film, and it's really funny to me to see, like, oh, if we interview someone in Arizona, we meet a lot of Arizona people buying a film. Or in this case, Munich, it'll be really interesting to see if some of the followers of our friend who was on today will be joining in. But one of the things I also really like, besides the kind of way to introduce the movie, I personally really like hearing the filmmakers talk about what they did and how long it took and funding. I think a lot of people really become filmmakers or starting off really want to know, how do you make money, how do you get money, project that you care about, how much you need, how do you set it up, how do you shoot, what happens if you're shooting.
Okay, so we lost Kayla for a moment. That's the blessing and curse of technology. But I think where she's going is that a lot of times what gets people excited is not just only watching the film, but learning everything that went behind it, about the people, the story, the filmmaker, the journey that you went on. We had one person that wanted to do a compilation reel of essentially like what's the most bizarre things that ever happened to you on an indie set, because I mean it ranges from guys that they were shooting like a gang execution scene but forgot to tell the neighbors and didn't have permits, and so someone called in that there was an execution happening in the park and the SWAT team arrived.
Yeah.
Gosh knows nowadays in the national park, as they're patrolling for unauthorized commercial photography, I think there's going to be a lot of filmmakers that are going to be playing Dodge the Ranger and doing all sorts of things to try to get their shot without being able to have the permits and all the pieces that to do it legitimately, because they just don't have the money to be able to do that. So, I think the world is changing. It's crowdfunding is a unique thing. To me, the most interesting part of it's not the money you get, but the audience that you build and engage through the process of making it. So, did you do any crowdfunding while you were with your film, Mark?
I did none for a band called Death. Like I was saying, that was all out of pocket, which was rough, and I'll never do that again. Both Jeff and I are in the poorhouse for at least the next decade. But my next film, the one I'm working on now, I did crowdfund, and it's interesting. I don't think I would have been able to reach my $30,000 goal without a band called Death and the publicity it got, and with getting my name out there. I think people put a lot more trust in me as a filmmaker to give me money, which was nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the most important thing that any investor probably wants to know is it going to get to market?
Yeah.
And so if you can have a competent strategy to show how that's in place, and in your case you have a reputation for already doing that and relationships, it's a better chance. But with the crowdfunding, how many people, of the $30,000, how many people contributed to achieve that?
Geez, there is like a pie chart. I can't remember. And there's a good majority that are friends and relatives that donate. But then there were a lot of people that came out of nowhere who donated a lot that I had no relation with, who just saw a band called Death. The guy that took us over the top, actually, I think we were $2,000 shy of reaching our goal. And you know, we were going to put the money in ourselves. That's what you do with crowdfunding. We did Kickstarter, so if you don't reach your goal, you don't make the money. So if you're $2,000 shy, you're going to put the money in yourself to get that money. But we were hoping that somebody would donate, and this guy that came in at the last hour, he wrote us his message. He said, "I saw a band called Death the other night at the Seattle International Film Festival, and I loved it so much that I went online. I wanted to see what the filmmakers are doing next. And I saw you had a website up for your current film and a Kickstarter, and I immediately donated. And he donated $2,000 and took us over the top, which was great. It made me feel good as a filmmaker that, you know, it made me feel like I'm doing something right for a change.
Oh, that's great. So now you're now in the process of that. As you go through the process of making it, finishing it, distributing it, as the world's changed, how would you handle the release, you know, the rest of this path forward differently than you did with your previous films?
Well, definitely, Jeff and I have been looking at A Band Called Death a lot with what we might have did wrong. I mean, it is a bummer after spending 4 years and Jeff getting a divorce that we haven't been paid anything. You know, that's just the reality of the situation. I mean, we made the film not for money; we made it to make the film. So there are things I'm doing differently to try and figure out how I can go about my current film, and possibly because there is some money that isn't the Kickstarter money, like we're done with the Kickstarter money that we put in ourselves. Like, how can we pay ourselves back for the time spent on the film? And so I'm looking into that. This documentary that I'm working on now is a short doc, so it is harder to make any money off of as opposed to a feature-length doc. We already have a museum that might want to distribute it, so that's going to be a very interesting new way of me releasing a film. I've never done that before. I don't know how that'll work, but we're talking to them, and yeah, it's going to be a completely different process than A Band Called Death, just because it's not a feature. It's going to be like 45 minutes or shorter.
Well, that's okay. So you know, I think we probably want to wrap up soon, so we don't take too much more time of yours. But having gone through this a number of times and been in the industry for a while, what advice would you give to filmmakers as they're planning out their release strategy?
I'd say don't write off self-releasing your film. I'm not saying that that's what we would have did with A Band Called Death. I'm happy that we went with Draft House. It's so much hard work when you self-release your film. But it is an option. You should think about it. You should think about, you should weigh your options. Look at what would happen if I went with this company. What would happen if I just released it myself? You know, when our film premiered at the Los Angeles Film Festival, a seasoned documentary filmmaker, came up to me, this British woman, and she asked me who our distributor was, and we didn't have one at the time. And immediately she was like, self-distribute. And I thought she was a crazy person. I didn't think you could self-distribute your movie. You know, we're talking 2012. I mean, things were still very, very new for self-distribution. And she just told me, she's like, if you don't self-distribute, you're never going to see a penny, unless you don't care about that. And I was like, well, I don't really care about that. I just want to get the film out there, because the reason we made the film was that the world could learn about death, and that's what Draft House did for us. But she did put that bug in my head that, you know, you could self-distribute, and that's what she was doing with her film, and she was very successful. There's things like educational distribution where most likely you will make money. I've talked to a few filmmakers who have released through educational distribution, and they're doing way better than any other filmmakers I've met who made documentaries. You know, I've met documentary filmmakers who made movies that were the biggest stocks of the year that made $3 million. I won't go into naming them or their movie, but they didn't receive a penny for their movie. I mean, so there are things to think about before you sign any contract with anybody. If you want to make money back, or if you want to make money in general, or if you don't care. So I just say, like, do your homework, think about it, think about what's important to you as a filmmaker. For us, it was just releasing the movie. We probably would have even released the movie ourselves for free if just to get it out there so that people could see it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and it's all absolutely all true. Nowadays, there's a gazillion channels, and they're growing daily. So I think the most important thing is to think about who your audience is, how you're going to reach them, what's important, because just being on iTunes may not be the answer. If you can't push through the marketing to get everybody to have eyeballs, it may be that there's a smaller platform. Even putting it out there for free, if nobody knows about it, it's still going to be completely unknown. So weigh those options. Self-distribution, I call it hybrid, because you still need assistance to get to certain places, but there's certain things you can do on your own now. And there's times and places where that's the appropriate thing. But you also want to weigh, if you're going to self-distribute, then you're making a commitment that for the next 2 to 5 years of your life, you're going to be eat, sleep, and breathing this film. And that may be great, or you may be ready to move on to your next one. So those are all the things that everybody wants to look at. And if you go the path, whether it's through a distributor or through retail or anybody, there's no such thing as creative accounting. It's creative lawyering. Every way that you could possibly be screwed is written in your contract. Because the accountants only interpret the contract, so don't sign anything that you don't understand, because that is when you hear the story of, like, oh, my distributor screwed me, or I got in trouble with this. Well, the truth is that it was all written out, you just didn't understand it. So make sure that you do that. And if you don't understand and you can't get answers to the questions, don't sign the deal, because that's clearly not in your best favor. And no matter which path you choose what's going to be best for the film and your career, and then don't worry about it. There's no such thing as a bad decision. There's just learning, and hopefully you set the stage for the next one, or at the very worst, like I know some of the very first films that I produced that we completely got screwed on. Within a couple of years' time, those deals will end and the rights will come back to me. And if I'm not embarrassed by the film that we made 10 years ago, then we have the right, we have the ability to put it back out in a new way and breathe some life into it. So, the world keeps changing. Stay on top of it. The biggest, most important thing in the world is make films that people want to watch, and then figure out who you're talking to and how to reach them. And then I really believe that at the end of the day, the rest of it will work itself out for the best.
I agree 100% with everything you just said.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you all so much. For those of you who are tuning in and you're not part of it, be sure to go to the Film Festival Flix Mountain Adventure Film Festival. It's going on our platform, filmfestivalflix.com, where you can engage in panels like this. They'll all be available afterwards. We have over 40 films from around the world, plus sponsored giveaways, taking you to the remote corners of the earth and inspiring you. And then in our VOD section, we have an amazing array of international art house and independent films, like A Band Called Death, that you can watch and enjoy. And our goal is, our tongue-in-cheek way of saying is, we watch thousands of mediocre films so you don't have to. And when you're looking for something good on a night to watch and you're not sure what's out there, and you want to take a risk on an unknown, come to us. We're scouring the world for some great films that are worth your time, and we guarantee it. If you're not happy with your selection, write me, and we will credit your next purchase, because I value your time, and I want you to see some of these amazing films that filmmakers like Mark have spent years of their life being passionate enough to make and share those stories. So with that, we're going to say goodbye, and we'll see you online.
See you guys.